ready to start our next part of the forum? And I will read to you the same thing I have read to the other candidates so you understand the rules. The candidates have agreed to a format and ground rules for tonight's forum. The candidates will have 60 seconds to respond to questions. A timer seated in the front of the room will give candidates visual signals to help them pace their responses. So make sure you can see the timer's cards. We've allowed time for rebuttals. Each candidate is allowed 2 30-second rebuttals. You have been given 2 rebuttal cards to indicate to the moderator that you wish to rebut a statement by your opponent. This is for rebuttal only, not a new statement. Okay? So, we are going to start with Mr. Cordes, and the first question is, what do you bring to City Council that Sunnyvale needs but doesn't have?
Thank you very much.
Yes, you're on.
Thank you. So what I bring to the council that I think is of the most value to the residents of Sunnyvale is decades of experience. I have 30 years of management experience before I retired, and now I have the time and dedication to be a great council member for you. I have a master's degree in engineering management, and I've worked on large, complex organizations like a city, doing product development across the world. I've been very engaged in Sunnyvale since retiring from work. I'm a member of Livable Sunnyvale. I'm starting my 5th year on the Bicycle and Pedestrian Commission, and I'm starting my 2nd year as chair. Currently also serving on Sunnyvale's Climate Committee because I care dramatically about the future of our planet. And I want to make sure the kids grow up safe, so I'm on our Sunnyvale Safe Routes to School Coalition. I'm one of the 2 volunteer co-leaders for that organization. I can go on and on. I'm also a member of Livable Sunnyvale, which is an advocacy group here, and you can find out a lot more about what I do on my website. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Fong?
Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you to the League and everyone for being here and everyone watching at home. Before I begin, I would like to publicly and sincerely apologize for a mailer that I sent out. I made a mistake. I'm owning that mistake where I listed Congressman Ro Khanna as an endorsement. He has not endorsed in Sunnyvale City Council seat 3 race, to set the record straight, and he has been very gracious and understanding in this mistake. I deeply, deeply apologize, and I would never want to misrepresent anything and anyone. With that said, I bring experience and new ideas to the City Council. I'm also a member of Livable Sunnyvale. I am the chair of the Sunnyvale Board of Library Trustees, and I have actually worked in government behind the scenes to do policy and community outreach. I have served under Congressman Ro Khanna and Congressman Mike Honda, and I currently work as the Housing and Transportation Policy Analyst to a council member in the city of San Jose, where I work on traffic mitigation, I work on affordable housing, I work on public safety, and I work on the environment.
Thank you. And Mr. Fong, we'll start with you for the second question. What is the most important priority for Sunnyvale City Council to work on in the coming year, and why?
I think the most important issue is to secure a future for our city and our future generations of Sunnyvale residents and current residents. I want to increase access to the Sunnyvale dream that many people had in the 1960s of moving here, owning a home, and sending their kids to schools in the heart of Silicon Valley. And I'm finding that more and more difficult as someone who makes less than $60,000 a year, who's wondering, how am I going to stay here? How am I going to be able to experience the great city that we have and make sure that others are going to do that? And how that I will do that is making sure that your taxpayer dollars are spent wisely and that we invest correctly in our future. That means building a branch library in the North Sunnyvale in the Lakewood Branch Library. That means completing our sewage water treatment plan. That means making sure that we stay the safest city in America 3 years in a row, and also making sure that we generate revenue to provide the best city services in the entire valley.
Thank you. Mr. Cordes?
I want to focus on quality of life issues for Sunnyvale residents, and the number 1 category that people bring up in that is traffic congestion. So I've worked on traffic as the chair of the Bicycle and Pedestrian Commission for quite a while now. I've also served on the Sierra Club's Sustainable Land Use Committee, where we also tackle this. And I'm also a member of the Sierra Club's transportation committee for the whole Bay Area. So I'm deeply involved and have studied this for quite a while, and I think it's the most important thing that pain point for residents today. There are a lot of other issues in the longer term that I think we need to address regarding the budget and creating a sustainable future for all of us. But the number one issue we should tackle is traffic and congestion. One of the things I want Sunnyvale to do is form a transportation commission. Cities around us that have their own shuttle systems have transportation commissions or assign it to some part of the government. So I definitely want to do that. Sunnyvale needs to start the Sunnyvale shuttle system. We have a $1 million grant from the Metropolitan Transportation Commission to fund a shuttle.
Thank you. And Mr. Curtis, we'll start with you with this question. I do let you finish your sentence or your thought, so you don't have to cut off immediately. In Sunnyvale, the median rent is $3,000 and the median home price is $1.9 million. What strategies would you champion to help make Sunnyvale a more affordable place to live?
So this issue is near and dear to my heart. I've had friends like Rich Colbert who've been forced to leave Sunnyvale, and he was a very active member in our community because he could no longer afford to stay here on his fixed income. I'm seeing the same kind of problems concerned with a lot of the people that live in the mobile home parks. So one of the first things we need to do is get rent stabilization passed in Sunnyvale for the residents of the mobile home parks. Sunnyvale is one of only 2 cities in the Bay Area that does not protect our mobile home park residents that way. 60% of them are on fixed or limited income, so we've got to do that. The next thing we need to do is to zone more land for more housing. So Sunnyvale's doing a pretty good job of focusing more housing in our transit corridors and redeveloping some of our old business parks, because more housing will help keep the costs down. We also need to increase find more funding to build more affordable housing. So I think there's a variety of strategies, including the employee business license tax, employer business license tax, that would be great sources for more funds to help people like Charity Housing build more housing.
Thank you. Mr. Fong?
Yes, so this issue is very near and dear to my heart. I'm a big fan of senior housing and workforce housing, and we need a plan to get that done. I'm also a big fan of mobile home preservation. We're keeping our zoning as it currently is. We need to increase the stock, but we also need to increase the stock across city lines, because Sunnyvale is the leader in producing housing, but other cities are not as prevalent. And so we need to figure out, as a region, how are we going to tackle this issue? We also need to generate more revenue, as my opponent mentioned. I am also in favor of increasing the business license tax in order to pay for general fund items. But we can generate all the revenue we need, but we need to invest it wisely. And so we will be working with organizations like Housing Trust Silicon Valley, Mid-Penn Housing, all our nonprofit providers that actually can go take the city's money and multiply it and then find the right financing to build the housing. Workforce housing is very important to the city because our employees are not able to live here. And if we can't retain them, your city services will go down.
Thank you. Mr. Fong, State Proposition 10 provides for cities to establish local rent control policies. Do you support or oppose Prop 10, and why or why not?
I have publicly supported Proposition 10 because I believe in local control. I believe a city should be able to do what it wants to the full extent that it wants to. If Proposition 10 is supported and Costa-Hawkins is repealed, I believe that there will be a very robust conversation at the state legislature to see how can we look at vacancy decontrol, the different components to rent control, and make sure that it works for each community. But I think that it's really important to have a city and its residents be able to determine the way legislation works, because ultimately a city like Sunnyvale might have different priorities than a city in Central Valley.
Thank you. Mr. Cordes?
I've been a strong advocate since it was first I heard about it, that I want to support the repeal of Prop 10. I want a yes vote on Prop 10. I think local control is the best solution. I agree that the state did a big overreach when it forced the same standards across all cities in the entire state. Every community should have the right to figure out for themselves what they think their best way to control their growth and their resident who can afford to stay in their cities. So very much in support of local control, and then we can have a robust decision. Sunnyvale actually has a big housing study going on right now that I've been participating in, and the city council intentionally decided not to include apartment rent stabilization in that. But it'll be interesting to see now that if this law gets passed and overturned, what we want to do as far as the city going forward, get the community together and figure out what makes sense so that we don't slow down the growth of housing stock. We need to continue to add the housing stock, but we need to find inventive ways to protect the residents that are here.
Okay, Mr. Cordes, what budget challenges do you see the council needing to address over the next 3 years?
So I've been studying Sunnyvale's budget for 3 years now, and it's 1,000 pages, just to give you a clue. And it's a very complicated document with a lot of priorities in it, and it's so very important. Sunnyvale is one of the safest and best rated cities in America because of the way we do our budgeting with a 10-year balanced budget requirement in our charter and our 20-year forecasting tool. So those are all great. I've been involved with the study issue looking on how Sunnyvale can increase its revenue. We actually have a separate study issue looking at revenue increases. For example, one of the things that came out of that is the ballot measure we have this fall on increasing the hotel occupancy tax that you're all going to get to vote on from 10.5% to 12%. So I think Sunnyvale's budget is in very good shape long term. The thing that I think that one of the things I really appreciate is we do have our own actuary that looks at what we think our costs are going to be in the future. We don't go by what CalPERS tells us. We figure out what we think our risks are, and we manage our risks ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Fong?
So I listened to the 8-hour-long budget study session in May, and thank you to the council for their hard work on our budget and past councils. They've done a great job. We have a 20-year budget, as everyone knows, and one of the biggest things that was said in the May discussion was pensions. That's the big item that's going to come up. We have a lot of negotiations that will be coming up for our service employees, our firefighters, our police officers, and our employees. And so that's a big ticket item that's going to be my first priority on the council, because that will be by June and July. Hopefully the negotiations will be up for discussion. I am also a big fan of increasing revenues because although we've been able to absorb the 2008 recession, we haven't been able to necessarily increase city services to the amount that we've been growing. And that's a big ticket item because you feel that as a resident. You feel that when you're stuck on 101. You feel that when you're stuck on Lawrence or Fremont, or you're stuck at a light and it's not optimized to be able to let you drive efficiently. And so that prevents you from being able to drop off your kids and other things.
Thank you. And Mr. Fong, proposals have been made to change Sunnyvale's election system to district elections in which residents in geographical areas would choose their representation. Do you support or oppose this proposal?
So I support this proposal because ultimately a lawsuit would put the taxpayer liable in the city. So I want to thank this current council for taking a proactive outreach. They haven't waited to be sued. They've proactively said, we need to study this because this is coming. And that's the foresight that is Sunnyvale's strength. And so I work for a council member now where we are in a district and there's a lot of benefits and a lot of cons. And so I'm very well versed on district elections. I'm very well versed on how a district would operate if implemented. And I'm looking forward to being on the council to be able to explore that more.
Thank you. Mr. Cordes?
I'm in favor of district elections for a couple of different reasons. One of them is I do think it will give better opportunity for diverse candidates to run and be successful in Sunnyvale. Sunnyvale did a study issue in 2008 and found that 10 out of 11 times the person that raised the most money won. This is not the way we should be electing our officials. We need to be having, and one of the big advantages of smaller districts is it's easier for candidates to get to know their constituents and be able to run. So for people that want to be represented by their neighbors and actually have somebody that's concerned about what's going on in their neighborhood, I think the change to district elections is going to be a huge benefit for all of us. We have way too much outside money flowing into elections in Sunnyvale. It's been a problem for a long, long time. It's easy for the developers to figure out who they need to fund to make sure they own 4 of the 7 seats on the council. And we have to put an end to this, and I think district elections is going to be one of the great ways we do that, including and increase the opportunity for local residents and local areas to be better represented.
Thank you. Mr. Cordes? Sunnyvale currently has a housing mitigation fee that charges commercial development and impact fee that goes into affordable housing programs. MTC is the Metropolitan Transportation Commission is exploring a regionally assessed commercial development fee for affordable housing. Do you agree or disagree with this kind of regional fee?
I disagree with a regional fee. Just as I've said on Prop 10, I think local decision-making and control is the best way for Sunnyvale to move forward. Sunnyvale has done better than almost any other community in building housing. Unfortunately, I wish I could say that was great for affordable housing, but we're still like at 7% for the next planning cycle on the number of affordable housing units we're building. The only reason that is a good number is it's better than anybody around us. So we definitely need to increase the fees we charge for housing so that we're doing a better job of creating more affordable housing. And I think increasing the fees we charge to the developers is one of my strategies for creating more affordable housing in Sunnyvale. I've looked at this issue for a long time, and I think it's the right move for Sunnyvale to make, to not give up our local control, to increase our local revenue sources so we can afford to build more affordable housing in here. That includes making it possible for developers to lower their costs in certain locations like along transit corridors by not requiring as much parking, and also allowing them to make units smaller. Right now, oftentimes developers will put everything in as 4-bedroom or 3-bedroom because they don't have enough room.
Your time is up now.
Sorry.
Thank you. Mr. Fong?
So I am also not supportive of a regional housing impact fee. My big issue is how are those fees going to be allocated, because if you look at other regional commissions, there's always a fight for money between cities. And so if we are the second largest city in the county, will we be proportionally represented when there is a larger city in the county that represents 10 times the amount of people that Sunnyvale does? That's my big concern. The county is currently looking at a sub-RENA task force, and they're looking at ways to increase the supply of housing and be able to make sure that it's fair. And I'm supportive of that exploration. I'm a big fan of urban villages, and that's what I really think the residents are going to feel the most, is if we can hone in on those community shopping centers and make sure that people can live, shop, and work in one central location, we will reduce traffic, provide affordable housing, and make sure that we retain the character of our neighborhoods.
Thank you. And we will start with you, Mr. Fong, on this one. Turn to traffic now. Besides the 101-237 Matilda interchange project currently underway, what other road improvements or transportation projects do you envision to bring traffic relief to North Sunnyvale in light of anticipated additional development?
My favorite question and everyone's favorite subject, traffic. There's already a lot the council's doing. The Perry Park shuttle program in North Sunnyvale that's provided by VTA funds. The MTC Horizon Plan, meaning that cities are allowed to propose a project to the Metropolitan Transportation Commission to explore big ideas like tunneling underground for subways. I'm honored to have worked on this issue for many years on Caltrain electrification, BART to Silicon Valley, and much more on light rail. And so I'm looking forward to be able to make sure that our residencies are able to have Caltrain's grade separation at Lawrence Station and downtown, more efficient traffic flow when there's a proposed development in the neighborhoods to avoid neighborhood traffic, and to make sure that light rail works in North Sunnyvale, because we have a lot of proposed development, Google, Facebook, other organizations, and we can get community benefits from them and help them pay for the impact that they're making.
Thank you. Mr. Cordes?
Thank you. So I've been studying traffic issues for quite a while as well. And like I said earlier, I'm on the Sierra Club's Transportation Commission. We've been studying the issue because it's affecting everyone up and down the Bay Area. Particularly in the northern Sunnyvale, since I'm up there and I relate to the people, and I've been trying to help the people in the mobile home parks. I've been paying attention to this. One of the things is that we need to, again, try and solve the jobs housing imbalance better than we've been doing in the past. So we need to be focusing on how we're going to add more housing in Sunnyvale as a way to mitigate traffic impacts, right? We're going to have to make it so people aren't commuting so far to get to their jobs. We also need to form a transportation commission that I mentioned before. We need to dramatically improve the bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure in Sunnyvale. We need to create more urban villages so people are less dependent on their cars to get around. Sunnyvale only has 1.5% people that commute by bicycle. Mountain View's at 6 and Palo Alto's at 9. So I want to triple the amount of people that are getting around by bicycles in Sunnyvale, and we need to invest in infrastructure to do that.
Thank you. Mr. Cordes? Sunnyvale led the effort to create Silicon Valley Clean Energy, which now provides 100% greenhouse gas-free electricity to our community and other cities nearby. What additional changes are needed to significantly reduce our community's carbon pollution and make the city more resilient to climate change?
So I've been focused on climate since 2005, even before Inconvenient Truth came out. It's been the number one Sierra Club priority since then. I'm on Sunnyvale's climate committee, so I've been actively working on how we're going to be able to meet our 2040 targets for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And the number one recommendation from the consultants that are working with us on that is we have to build more housing so people have to drive less, right? The number one way, we have to effectively cut 80% of our driving out, and the only way we can do that is with more housing in Sunnyvale. Also, we need to stop digging holes, so we have to ban any new natural gas installations, right? When you're in a hole, you have to stop digging, so we have to stop promoting the burning of fossil fuels, and that means everything going forward is going to be electric. I read the staff report on the green building program that just came out this week, and they're only proposing that all electric be required as the top level incentive program. They're not requiring it in any of the lower levels, and I think we really have to go back and tell them that's not enough.
Thank you. Mr. Huang?
Yes, so the green building program will be coming to the council soon, and so that's a great program to incentivize more clean energy usage at our office spaces and even in our residential. Transportation makes up about almost half of what our carbon emissions are left. And so we've been doing a great job, the council has done a great job on reducing carbon emissions, but transportation is the big ticket item. And so one thing is, yes, build where we live, work, and shop. So mixed use development, increase the source of mixed use development and incentivize it. Convert by the 2020 state mandated standard for CEQA analysis for our environment to reduce our carbon emissions to vehicle miles traveled to be able to more effectively evaluate how traffic is created. Alternative forms of transportation, electric biking, electric scooters, and working across city lines. That's the biggest thing for me, is that we have a lot of connections that can be made that can incentivize bicycling, that can incentivize walkability. And so Wisman Station in Mountain View and other places.
Thank you. And we'll start with you, Mr. Fong, on this. Would you share what significant contributions, if any, to your 2018 City Council campaign were from PACs? If so, what PACs?
Yeah, so I'm honored to have a diverse support, and I've been able to have business support and also labor unions in addition to residents. And so I'm a big fan of making sure that before I take a contribution, I speak with that person and I tell them my values and say, if you don't agree with them, I understand and I look forward to working with you, but I cannot accept your contribution. And so when I meet with the business community, my top priority is small business and retaining our small business, making sure our dry cleaners can stay here, make sure that if we do redevelop anywhere, that we keep the character of our community. When I've met with the unions, I tell them, I am one of you. I am a service employee. I make under $60,000 a year. I pay $1,200 a month in rent plus utilities, and I'm not saving a single dime. And so how am I going to afford that $500,000 condo, that $750,000 unit? How am I going to afford a $2 million home to be able to send my future kids to Fremont High School and Cupertino and Homestead High School? So that's a big ticket item for me, is making sure that my support reflects my values.
Thank you. Mr. Cordes?
Thank you. I am not taking any donations from any political action committees or developers, and almost 74% of my donations have come from Sunnyvale residents. The highest donation I think I have is to date is $1,000, right? So I'm dependent on many of you to contribute to my campaign. I have many volunteers helping me succeed because I'm not going to be able to outspend Mr. Fong. He's raised triple the amount of money that I have, and only 22% of his funds are coming from within Sunnyvale, right? So I don't know why the California Realtors Association PAC is giving him $2,000, and the California Bay Area Council independent expenditure of $7,000 for a mailer for him and Mr. Larson, and the California Apartment Association committee has given him a $5,000 independent expenditure. I mean, they're not doing this out of the goodness of their hearts, so I have to wonder what's going on. Thank you.
And we have a rebuttal here, 30 seconds.
So any resident can look on the city clerk's website and go to the net file system to see the transparency. And I want to be a transparent council member and public official. I have received, as I mentioned, funds from both businesses and labor, but labor is the most important to me because I represent working families. I'm fighting for working families to be able to stay here. I've received, IEs are actually independent expenditures, and we have no control as candidates. The committee is actually the one that decides how to spend their money, and those are filed on NetFile under a different section.
Thank you. And let's see, we start the next question with, can't read my notes here. Mr. Cordes, is that correct? Or
I believe so.
okay, now let me find the question. So that one was 9, and I'm looking for 10. Please specifically let me start over again. Please specifically explain the levels of new office and new housing development that you support and where. Also address how exactly you will provide the necessary infrastructure improvements to support such continued growth, public safety, fire, and traffic.
So I've been engaged in Sunnyvale for a long time. It's my home, and I'm deeply committed to it. I've been involved with the general plan update that Sunnyvale did, and I've been involved with the Lawrence stationary plan that's still in the process of being developed. I've been involved with the Lawrence, the El Camino Real specific plan. So those are the places where Sunnyvale is picked to do our future growth. They're going to be around 6,000 homes at Lawrence Station, around 5,500 homes along the El Camino Real, 4 miles of the El Camino Real corridor. There's 1,000 homes planned for 1 AMD Place where Dwayne and Stewart meet. So you can see I've been deeply involved in looking at this for a long time. As far as more infrastructure, I think it's appropriate for the businesses that are driving all our traffic congestions, particularly impacting the police officers, that they have to provide more funds to provide more services that we need in Sunnyvale. We've done the nexus reports that show the impact of these businesses, and we are not requiring that they pay anywhere near the fees that for the services they require.
Thank you. Mr. Fong?
Yeah, so I believe that the City Council is looking at transit-oriented stations like Lawrence Station, downtown, El Camino, and Moffett, and I agree with those. I'm all about budget diversification because if we want to slow office growth, we need to follow the money and look at the numbers. And 40% of our revenue is property tax, 20% is sales tax. So if we increase mixed-use development through our urban villages and through other items, we can actually make sure people can live, work, and shop in one place, and that our budget isn't reliant on office space. We also need to make sure that our public safety officers can adequately address our emergency response times, and we're missing 12 positions in our city. And when I've met with the public safety officers, that was one of the first questions they asked me. How are you going to make sure we can do our job? And they support me because my strategy is to make sure that we have an actual master plan to fill our vacant positions, not only in public safety, but in our parks department, in our public works department, in all of our city, because that makes our job a lot better.
Thank you. And Mr. Fong, the impact of San Jose, SJC, San Jose Airport, South Flow in the last 2 years due to the FAA's next-gen implementation has made airplane noise difficult for particular sections of Sunnyvale. Do you believe it is an issue? If so, what specific measures will you and can you take to address the noise?
Yes, I believe it's an issue. I've been dealing with this issue in various roles. I first encountered it in Congressman Mike Honda's office, where I was the point staffer for it. And thank you to Mayor Hendricks for his leadership in establishing an ad hoc committee, which is a bunch of cities put together that are going to have a louder voice to our FAA director. The big issue that I saw was that we need to be able to act regionally in order to be taken seriously on the federal level. And I'm thankful to be able to have that experience working on issues in different levels of government and knowing where the pressure points are and how to strategize to actually solve the issue. I do believe it's an issue. I've knocked on many doors. I've felt my window shake during South Flow, and it wakes up young children and makes sure that their parents aren't able to be 100% at the workplace. And these are issues I've encountered when knocking on doors of residents.
Thank you. Mr. Cordes?
I've been working on this issue for quite a while myself. I even attended some of the ad hoc meetings that were being held in San Jose. I got there on my bicycle from here. So I've met with the Save My Sunny Skies people. I've talked with them. I've talked with plenty of residents that are very concerned about the noise. They say they can't sleep when the South Flow is in effect. I've talked with Congressman Ro Khanna, I've talked with Anna Eshoo. They are trying to put pressure on the FAA to change the noise standards, which is really the only possible solution we have for this. I'm concerned that we may have to go to we should definitely hire consultants to help represent us, and it's going to take a lot of us to try and change this. We are in a really tight box with 3 major airports in the Bay Area about where we can move the planes. There were 72 recommendations from the Save Our Sunny Skies that they asked the FAA to say, why can't you do this? And they shot down almost every single one of them. So it's going to be a complicated problem. They've got a lot of knowledge. We should leverage their expertise in trying to find a solution for solving this problem. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we come to the final question, and we will start with Mr. Fong because he was second in the beginning. Please state and answer a question you wish you had been asked.
I think I wish I had been asked, I think I wish I had been asked, what drives you to make a difference in your community, whether it's on city council or in any role? And I've had the honor to work with various elected officials and be mentored by them. And what it really comes down to is public service is not about service to oneself, but service to one's community. And I'm a strong believer in that. And so for me, I come from a public service family. My mother was a planner, worked for Governor Brown. My father was a staff member to an elected official, and they instilled in me community organizing. That's where the core of my values are, and when I make any vote on the city council or I have any discussion in the community at a planning meeting, I will be making sure that I represent the community and I'm organizing for the community, that I'm trying to make sure that your neighborhood reflects your character and your values when a hotel is proposed behind your house, when a El Camino is having renovations with the county and the state. And so that's really something I hope that everyone can be able to take away from this.
Thank you. Mr. Cordes, what question do you wish you had been asked?
So I wish I'd had more time to talk about everything I'm trying to do for the residents of Sunnyvale. I didn't get anywhere near enough time in 60 seconds to cover what I'm doing. I serve at the homeless shelter for the residents of Sunnyvale. I also volunteer at my church with the homeless shelter. We have them come stay with us for a month a year. I run the family giving tree program at my church for giving gifts at Christmas time and doing the backpack drive in the summer. I'm heavily engaged in trying to do everything I can to make Sunnyvale better. I've served 3 years as my neighborhood association chair. We're the only neighborhood association chair to do a float in the Sunnyvale parade. We're also the only one to form a 501c4 to better service the residents. So now it's easiest for us to collect money and spend it. And we do that a great job of that in Snail. We have the most active neighborhood association around. We have monthly newsletters, monthly speakers. It can go on and on. You'll have to check on my website if you want to see everything. So thank you for this opportunity to talk to you about why I'm passionate about Sunnyvale and why I think I should be your next council member.
Thank you. And join me in an applause for these candidates. And thank you, candidates, for participating in this forum and considering serving the community. The candidates will remain after the forum to give you a chance to talk with them individually. You may also pick up candidate literature at the table at the back of the room. Visit lwvcs.org in the coming days to find video of tonight's forum. Go to the calendar on that website and scroll down to the listing for this event to find the link for the forum video. I also encourage you to check out votersedge.org, formerly Smart Voter, the League of Women Voters election information website. Among other valuable information content includes money behind political campaigns at the federal and state levels. I want to thank the audience for coming tonight. I also thank all the people who sent us questions by mail. We greatly appreciate the City of Sunnyvale for the use of the board, for the use of this council chamber, and for the KMVT crew whose work makes this forum available to all Sunnyvale voters. We hope tonight's forum has helped you with your voting decisions. Please remember to vote on November 6th. Good night.